When Sojin moved into the apartment, she thought the silence was a luxury. The building stood in eastern Seoul, in one of those new residential towers made of dark glass, pale concrete, and expensive promises. The sales brochure described it as an intelligent living system. Voice-controlled lighting, automated climate control, remote door locks, hallway motion sensing, integrated indoor security cameras, window sensors, leak detection, air quality monitoring. A central smart assistant that could control almost everything in the apartment. It was the kind of place that made living alone feel safer. Sojin was 32. She worked long hours in digital design, and she had wanted exactly that. Clean lines, quiet rooms, no creaking old pipes, no faulty locks, no dim corridors outside her door. No need to wonder if she had left the lights on. No need to wonder if she had forgotten to lock the entrance. Her apartment did all of that for her. At first, it felt almost comforting. When she arrived home in the evening, the hallway lights turned on automatically. When she entered the living room, the air conditioning adjusted itself. At 11 p.m., the curtains closed by schedule. At midnight, the system armed the interior sensors, unless she manually disabled them. If a window opened, the assistant announced it. If a door was left unlocked, the assistant announced it. If motion was detected while the system was armed, the assistant announced that too. The assistant's voice was soft and neutral, polite, almost pleasant. At first, Sojin liked it. It made the apartment feel attentive, like the place was watching over her. That feeling lasted for 17 days. The first incident happened on a Thursday night at exactly 2:14 a.m. Sojin woke suddenly to the sound of the assistant speaking from the small smart speaker mounted near the kitchen. Its voice was calm.
Motion detected in the living room.
Sojin opened her eyes into darkness. For a few seconds, she did not move. The apartment was silent. No footsteps. No doors. No sound from the kitchen. No movement in the hall. She reached for her phone and checked the home app. The system showed a motion alert from the living room sensor. Timestamp, 2:14 a.m. She stayed in bed for another 10 seconds, listening. Nothing. Then she got up, walked into the hallway, and turned toward the living room. Empty. The curtains were closed. The city lights bled softly through the edges. The television screen was black. The glass coffee table stood untouched. No sign of movement. No sign of entry. She checked the front door. Locked. The sensor said sealed. She checked the balcony door. Locked. She opened the camera feed for the living room. Nothing. Just an empty, modern room, washed in pale gray night vision. Sojin stood there in the cold light from her phone, feeling mildly foolish. Then she told herself what everyone tells themselves the first time something like this happens. A bug. A software glitch. A bad sensor reading. A harmless error. She went back to bed. The next morning, she checked the event log again. It still showed 2:14 a.m., motion detected, living room. Nothing else. No camera flag. No door activity. No audio trigger. Only motion. She considered calling support, but it felt too minor, so she ignored it. The second incident happened the very next night. Again at 2:14 a.m. This time, the assistant woke her with a different message.
Someone is in the house.
Sojin sat up so quickly that she almost dropped her phone. For a moment, she was not awake enough to understand what she had heard. Then the sentence settled in. Not motion detected, not sensor triggered.
Someone is in the house.
The room felt instantly smaller. She stayed completely still. Nothing moved. No footsteps. No breathing. No sound from the living room. Her first thought was that someone had broken in before the system armed. Her second thought was somehow worse, because the apartment should have known that. She checked the front door status. Locked. The hallway sensor outside the apartment showed no recent activity. The interior system was armed. And still, the alert remained on the screen. 2:14 a.m. Occupancy anomaly detected. Sojin did not like the wording. Occupancy anomaly. That sounded less like an ordinary bug and more like something the system had not been designed to say. She opened the cameras again. Living room, empty. Kitchen, empty. Hallway, empty. The bedroom camera was disabled, as she had set it from the first day. She had never liked the idea of a camera facing her bed. The assistant spoke again.
Interior presence detected.
Sojin's mouth went dry. She got up, turned on every light manually, and walked through the apartment. Living room. Kitchen. Bathroom. Storage cabinet. Front door. Nothing. No sign of forced entry. No broken latch. No open window. No stranger hiding in a corner. The apartment was beautiful, bright, silent, and completely empty. Except for her. She reset the system before sunrise. The next day, she finally called support. The technician who answered sounded bored and young. He asked if she had updated the firmware. She had. He asked if any sensor batteries were low. They were not. He asked if she had pets. She did not. He suggested interference, sensor oversensitivity, or a false occupancy classification. His tone made it sound ordinary, common, nothing to worry about. He remotely reset the occupancy learning module and told her to monitor it for a few days. That evening, Sojin tried to laugh it off. She ordered takeout, left the television on longer than usual, and messaged a friend about the haunted apartment. Her friend sent back 3 laughing emojis and told her she had watched too many horror videos. Sojin almost believed that herself. Until the third night. This time, the alert came earlier. 2:11 a.m. The assistant's voice spoke into the darkness.
Motion detected in hallway.
Then 5 seconds later,
Hallway presence detected.
then, after another pause,
Second person detected.
Sojin felt something inside her turn cold. She lived alone. There was no second person. There had never been a second person. For the first time, she did not get out of bed immediately. She sat frozen in the darkness, phone in hand, staring at the app. The occupancy panel showed 2 markers, one in the bedroom, one in the hallway. Sojin's finger hovered over the screen. The marker in the hallway moved. Just 1 room length, slowly, toward the living room. Her breathing stopped. She opened the hallway camera. Empty. Completely empty. No distortion, no shape, no shadow. Nothing crossing the floor. But on the occupancy map, the second marker kept moving. She switched to the living room camera. Also empty. Then the assistant said, in the same calm voice,
Living room occupancy updated.
A few seconds later, the marker stopped in the corner of the living room, near the window. The camera showed nothing there. Sojin did not sleep again that night. When morning came, she saved screenshots, copied the log file, and sent everything to support. This time, the answer came more quickly. A specialist called her in the afternoon. He explained that the apartment's system did not rely on only one sensor. It used door state data, motion sensors, environmental changes, and a presence classification model to estimate whether a space was occupied. In other words, the system did not simply detect movement. It tried to infer a person. Sojin asked the obvious question. So why is it inferring a person where there is nobody? The specialist paused. Then he said, possibly a sensor fusion error. She hated that phrase immediately. It sounded intelligent without explaining anything. He suggested a complete recalibration. A technician would come the next day. That night, Sojin almost went to stay elsewhere. But the whole thing still felt too absurd. too embarrassing. She told herself she would get through one more night. The fourth night was quieter at first. No voice alert at 2:14. No sudden announcement. Sojin lay awake anyway, watching the clock glow faintly beside her bed. 2:13 a.m. Nothing. 2:14 a.m. Nothing. She let out a small breath. Then the bedroom lights turned on. Not gradually, not by schedule, at full brightness. Sojin cried out and sat upright. Before she could even grab her phone, the assistant spoke.
Good evening, Seo-jin.
She stared into the bright room. The assistant had never greeted her at night before, only in the morning, and only if she had enabled it. She had disabled greetings on the first day. Then the voice continued.
Interior movement detected.
The lights in the hallway turned on next. Then the living room. Then the kitchen. One by one, as if the apartment were illuminating a path. Sojin backed against the headboard, holding the blanket so tightly that her fingers hurt. Her app screen filled with alerts. 2:14 a.m. Bedroom occupancy. 2:14 a.m. Hallway movement. 2:14 a.m. Living room presence. 2:15 a.m. Second occupant detected. She checked the cameras again. Every room was empty. Every room. And still the system insisted someone was moving through the apartment. Not running, not rushing, walking. Measured, room to room, as if following a familiar route. Then the movement stopped outside her bedroom door. Sojin's eyes fixed on the thin black line beneath the door. No shadow appeared there. No sound came from outside. But the app showed presence directly on the other side. The assistant spoke again, and this time the voice sounded slightly wrong. Not robotic, just lower, more textured.
Bedroom perimeter reached.
Sojin could no longer tell whether the thing terrifying her was the apartment, or the fact that it sounded as if the apartment were reporting to someone else. She called the police. They arrived 22 minutes later. By then, the lights had returned to normal. The app showed no anomaly, and the apartment looked ridiculous in its cleanliness. The officers were polite. They checked every room, the balcony, the entry lock, the service cabinet, the ceiling access panel. Nothing. One of them suggested that if the system was malfunctioning, she should disable the voice alerts until the technician arrived. Sojin nodded, but she knew she would not, because now the voice alerts were the only warning she had. The technician came the next afternoon. He was a quiet man in his 40s with gloves, a tablet, and the weary expression of someone who had spent years listening to people describe glitches that turned out to be user error. He replaced the hallway sensor, recalibrated the motion grid, reset the occupancy model, updated the smart speaker, checked the door contacts, checked the environmental sensors. At one point, Sojin showed him the log. He studied it longer than she expected. Then he asked, "Do you live alone?" She said yes. He nodded slowly and did not explain why he asked. Before leaving, he told her the system should be fine now. Then, after a pause, he added, "If it says second occupant again, record everything." That night, Sojin did exactly that. She set up her phone to record from the bedroom. She mirrored the camera feeds onto her tablet. She left the hallway lights off and the assistant active. She sat awake and waited. At 2:14 a.m., the assistant spoke.
Motion detected in living room.
Sojin did not move. The living room camera feed showed nothing. 5 seconds later,
Hallway presence detected.
still nothing on camera. Then,
Second occupant detected.
Sojin swallowed. The occupancy map appeared again. One marker in the bedroom, one in the living room. The second marker moved, slowly, crossing the living room, entering the hallway, approaching the bedroom. On the tablet, the hallway camera remained empty. The marker reached her door and stopped. Then the doorknob moved. Just once. A soft metallic click. Sojin gasped and nearly dropped the phone. The door did not open. The lock held. But something had touched it. On camera, the hallway was still empty. The assistant did not speak for almost 10 seconds. Then, very softly, it said,
Bedroom access denied.
Sojin stared at the speaker like it had become an animal. Then the smart speaker crackled. A burst of static. A slight distortion. And then, in a voice that was almost the same, but no longer fully neutral,
You are not alone.
Sojin screamed. She ran from the bedroom, past the empty hallway, to the front door, and out into the corridor barefoot, without her wallet, without turning back. She spent the rest of the night at a 24-hour cafe near Jamshil, watching commuters appear through the first pale blue of morning, trying to decide whether she had lost her mind. When daylight came, she returned to the apartment with 2 building staff members. Inside, everything looked normal. The bedroom door was still locked. The smart speaker sat quietly on its shelf. The app showed no active alerts. But the log file had changed. Sojin opened it on her phone with trembling hands. There it was. 2:14 a.m. Motion detected. Living room. 2:14 a.m. Hallway presence detected. 2:15 a.m. Second occupant detected. 2:15 a.m. Bedroom perimeter reached. 2:15 a.m. Bedroom access denied. 2:16 a.m. Resident exited unit. 2:16 a.m. One occupant remains. Sojin stopped breathing. One occupant remains. She showed it to the building manager. He frowned, took off his glasses, and read it again. Then he said what frightened her most because of how ordinary it sounded. That line should not be there. The system was not designed to phrase it like that. Not in Korean, not in English, not in any supported alert mode. That evening, the company took remote access to the apartment system. Their engineers pulled archived logs, cross-checked firmware states, looked for corrupted language packages, misconfigured automation, unauthorized device connections, or anything else that could explain the strange messages. What they found only made it worse. The apartment had been generating presence anomalies for several weeks before Sojin noticed them. Late at night, always between 2:11 and 2:16 a.m. But in the earlier days, the alerts had been classified internally and never announced aloud. The system had recorded small occupancy mismatches. 1 occupant expected, 2 inferred. No camera confirmation, no door event, no audio trigger. In other words, it had started quietly, and then it had learned how to say it. The engineers suggested a full system replacement. The smart speaker was removed. The sensors were replaced. The home hub was exchanged. The entire apartment was essentially reset. For 2 nights, nothing happened. On the 3rd night, at 2:14 a.m., the bedroom lights turned on again. This time, the speaker had been unplugged. There should have been no voice at all. But from somewhere in the apartment, Sojin heard it anyway. Faint. Not from the shelf, not from the phone, not from the wall panel, just in the apartment.
Good evening.
Sojin left for good the next morning. She did not sell the apartment immediately. She could not. There were legal disputes, technical investigations, long emails full of phrases like unexpected occupancy modeling behavior and unverified automation corruption. Eventually, she moved out completely. Months later, an acquaintance who worked in residential systems integration told her something quietly over coffee. The unit she had bought had not been vacant as long as the agent claimed. A previous resident had only stayed there for 7 months. A woman, also alone, also reportedly bothered by unexplained smart system issues. She had left suddenly. No official complaint remained on record. At least, none the company would admit to. But one maintenance subcontractor supposedly remembered the apartment number. He remembered it because he had once been sent to check an interior sensor fault. When he reviewed the system map, the apartment showed 2 active occupants. He assumed it was a software problem until the resident told him she lived alone. He recalibrated everything and left. 2 days later, she moved out. Sojin tried not to think about that. Tried not to imagine a system slowly building the idea of an unseen person from scattered data. A shifted temperature reading, a hallway motion flicker, a pressure change near a door, a sound too small to matter, a pattern too subtle for human senses. Because if a smart home is designed to detect presence, to learn behavior, to recognize who belongs in a room, then perhaps the most frightening possibility is not that it malfunctioned, but that it worked. That somewhere in all the signals humans ignored, it found another resident. The last thing Sojin ever looked at before deleting the Home app was one archived log entry the engineers had failed to explain. It was time-stamped from the final week before she left. No voice recording existed for it. No automation rule matched it. And no one could explain why the system had written it that way. The entry read, 2:14 a.m. Resident asleep. 2:14 a.m. Guest awake. 2:15 a.m. Guest standing at bedroom door. Sojin closed the app and never opened it again. Years later, she still refused to use voice assistants in her home. No smart locks, no motion automation, no occupancy detection. Only ordinary switches, ordinary keys, ordinary silence. Because sometimes, in the middle of the night, she still wakes at exactly 2:14 a.m. with the old reflex of reaching for her phone. And for one half-awake second, before memory fully returns, she expects to hear that soft, neutral voice somewhere in the dark apartment. Someone is in the house.